Well, hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This is a car that I wanted to feature for a while, as I keep explaining, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself ad nauseum, but this is the channel is based around the activities of the workshop, not the other way around. So we're as and when the opportunities present themselves, we have to take them. And this is a car I'd love to have featured a while back, but it hasn't happened until now. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. So here we are. We have the Ferrari BB 512i. This is a very interesting part of Ferrari's history. In the 1950s and 60s and early 70s, Ferrari had at his disposal very clever engineers, Carlo, Chiti, Giotto, Bizzarrini, Aurelio, Lampredi. All these people had incredibly talented sort of CVs, and they could design an engine just like that, and that's what happened actually. Colombo, Lampredi with the bigger V12s, the 4.1, the 4.4 litre engines in the 1950s, etc. And then eventually Ferrari got to the stage where in Formula One, which was, let's face it, the most prestigious racing arena on the planet, they eventually managed to settle on a 3 litre flat 12 engine. It was an interesting diversion, because up to then it had been the engine that really made Enzo Ferrari was the original 1.5 litre Colombo V12. The Boxer engine is a flat engine, so in other words it's got 2 banks of 6 cylinders horizontally opposing each other with a common crankshaft in the middle. And as people have mentioned on several occasions when I've talked about a Porsche 911 or any other car with a Boxer engine, it isn't actually a Boxer engine at all. It's a horizontally opposed V12 or flat 12 or 180 degree V12. So a Boxer engine, actually the pistons do that. They have separate pins on the crankshaft, and the horizontally opposed pistons effectively box against each other, figuratively speaking, hence Boxer. But with these engines, they share a crank pin, so the pistons do that, each pair of pistons. So this is, if you want to look at it this way, this is 2 6-cylinder engines melded into one flat 12. Now, Ferrari in the late 60s and early 70s, as I say, they discovered, first of all, Enzo Ferrari was not as progressive as people would have us believe. He was actually quite a conservative man. He was late to adopt fuel injection onto cars, even on the racetrack. First used in the P3 and P4, I think, from memory. As ever, Enzo Ferrari, in spite of the fact that he was very conservative, for example, shunned fuel injection on cars even until the mid-1960s. British fuel injection, Lucas actually, he shunned that for years before then. It was really his engineers who helped him push the boundaries in a lot of ways, and the flat 12 engine was born out of a need to keep develop maximum power from maximum cubic capacity. In the case of the early flat 12 racing cars, the 312, 312T, I say early, not the earliest, but the more generally accepted and sort of known about Formula One cars, with a beautiful 312 and 312T, the Emerson Fittipaldi, Niki Lauda era. And they had flat 12 engines. There are various advantages to the flat 12 engines. The fact that the engine can be mounted quite low in the car, because it's flat by implication, means it can be mounted low. Interestingly, that doesn't happen in this car for reasons I shall explain. The fact that the engine is actually reciprocating against each other, each bank is actually sending its combustion forces into the crankshaft, actually in the middle, means that the engine is actually very strong by definition. The bottom end of the engine is very strong. There are other things like something as simple as the induction system is spaced on either side above the cylinder head. There's a good gap, there's plenty of room. They can give an optimal induction system, and the same with the exhaust system. And the exhaust system is very complicated. on this car, actually. Part of the reason why these engines are so powerful for their given capacity is the harmonics of everything that is going on. Consequently, the exhaust runs underneath the engine, out the back. Again, there's relatively large amount of room for the exhaust system to do its thing. It's not particularly restricted, but it is quite the work of art, the exhaust system. But the upshot of all that was, while all this race car technology was going on and the flat 12s developed through the 60s and 70s, Ferrari brought out the Daytona in 1968, the wonderful Daytonas. It's one of my favourite Ferraris. The press, the motoring press, were shocked because it was a traditional front engine rear-wheel drive car, and they thought, well, yawn, this is what the 275 GTB4 had. Enzo Ferrari had the last laugh because the Daytona turned out to be a wonderful piece of machinery, capable of crossing continents at sustained high speeds. It did a genuine 174 miles an hour out of the box. This is when Porsches were barely able to reach 150. The Lamborghini Miura was hot on its heels, then the Countach, but it was very difficult to get a definitive top speed. In the real world, a Miura and a Countach would probably be around about the 174 mile an hour top speed mark. So the Daytona was arguably the world's fastest production car for a number of years, but it was traditional. It was front engine, rear wheel drive, a concept that worked very well. You had the front mid engine, luggage space at the rear, fuel tanks at the rear, relatively low center of gravity again. In fact, Luca di Montezemolo introduced the front engine rear wheel drive concept 2 decades later, in 1995, when he launched the 550 Maranello, because there was still a market for a front-engine rear-wheel drive supercar, 200 mile an hour car. Having said that, the Daytona was getting seemingly a bit long in the tooth around about 1972, 73, and Enzo Ferrari was convinced eventually that the mid-engine, rear mid-engine concept was the way to go. So here we arrive at the Berlinetta Boxer, or BB. It's quite interesting. I've out of mischief parked a Dino 246 that we happen to have in the workshop alongside this car. And it's quite funny about perceptions about sizes of cars and relationships, one thing or another. These are almost contemporaneous. The Dino went out in 73 and the Boxer was brought out in 73. So they almost overlap. The funny thing is, we think of the Dino as the baby Ferrari. It's a tiny car, it's agile, it's got a small little, in this car, 2.4 litre V6 engine. And then we think of the Boxer as the Ferrari's ultimate for a number of years before the 288 GTO came out in 1984. This was a supercar, the supercar in the Ferrari range. This is far quicker than the Dino. But the funny thing is, there's only 6 inches difference in length between them, just under 7 inches. So the baby Dino is almost as big as the brutally fast supercar, top of the range 512 or 365. So really interesting that, you know, perceptions, you look at a Dino and think, oh, how cute. And you look at this and think, whoa, but actually they're almost the same size. The Boxer actually developed drastically through its life. So I am being a bit mischievous here. But this is the 3rd generation of the Boxer, the BBI, the Berlinetta Boxer injection. The very first generation was the 365, 365 cc per cylinder, times 12 equals 4,400, 4.4 litre. But the funny thing is that the 365 was a very different animal to this in a lot of ways. The engine characteristics were very different. It was a more cami engine. So the power, instead of being linear right up to the 7,700 RPM red line, like the likes of a Dino 308 Daytona of the era, because they all had the same basic valve timing setups, which worked very well. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the Dino developed 195 brake horsepower, according to Ferrari's figures at the time at the flywheel. The original 365 Boxer, because it was higher tuned than the later 512s, developed supposedly 380, which is roughly twice as much power as the Dino, which you'd sort of expect because it's a 4.4 litre 12-cylinder engine against a 2.4 litre 6-cylinder engine. But the Boxer was heavier. It was about 10% heavier than the Dino. What I'm getting at is the original version of this car, before Ferrari started to tame it a bit, was actually almost twice the power to weight ratio of that car. Incredible, really. And the original Boxer, I've driven every generation of Boxer and worked on them over the last 40 years. The interesting thing is how different these three generations of Boxers are to drive. More of that later. We will take it out for a road test. The difference between the two, they're almost the same size car, but the difference in performance and power to weight is off the scale. The later Boxers became quite a bit more lardy, actually. They went up about 300 kilos in weight, 400 kilos even, over the earlier cars, and I can explain about that while we're out road testing it. Ferrari, like a lot of manufacturers, Citroën, even Lamborghini actually, experimented with metric tyres, 390 or 415 millimeter diameter wheels, and they came and went, really. Very interesting. Inches are still the world standard for wheel diameters and tyre diameters. They were a bit of a flash in the pan. The TRX was used on also BMW 7 Series, E32, that was another one that used them, and they were notoriously noisy, the TRXs, because the tread pattern is quite rough on them. But Ferrari used them on all their cars at one stage. So a lot of differences over the earlier, less low-profile Michelins. It's always something that's interested me, this interplay between the Boxer and the Dino. The original version of this was so fast compared to the Dino. There's a world of difference between them. How can a manufacturer make almost the same car that's got twice as much power as the other one has? Well, it happens quite a lot, I guess. But it didn't happen in those days, particularly so much. Where was the cost? Well, the front compartment is very similar. It houses the spare wheel, it houses the battery, a lot of ancillaries, the radiator, etc. The cost was from here back. The flat 12 engine takes all this space up, whereas on the Dino it's mounted across the car as opposed to lengthwise in this, and you have a sizable luggage compartment, a sizable boot at the back of the car. The only problem is it got very hot because the exhaust was right underneath it, so you couldn't pack your ice creams for your drive out in the afternoon in the back of a Dino and hope for them to be there in one piece. The flat 12 engine in the Boxer, Ferrari had to make a compromise because of the length. They didn't have the room, without making the car inordinately long, to put the gearbox where they would like it to have been on the back of the engine, because it would have stuck it to another metre in lost length basically on the car, and it just would have made the car, as I say, far too long. So what they did was mount the engine above the transmission. So you've got the clutch at the back of the engine and gearbox, and then it feeds down into the gearbox underneath the engine. The result of that is the centre of gravity on this car is quite high because the engine is mounted high, as it was in the later Testarossa. They all had the same characteristics, the mid-engined Ferrari supercars of this era. It made for interesting handling. I do remember talking to some people in the States, 40 years ago, when I was over there on Rolls-Royce business, and they actually said to me that they'd blown up the bottom end on their Ferrari 365, as well as gone sideways on wherever it was, racetrack, Laguna Seca or something, because the high centre of gravity had caused a sort of a Porsche 911 tail swing moment, and the fact that the engine drew on oil from underneath the sump and was high in extreme cornering, it suffered from oil starvation and blew the bottom end of the engine up. Ferrari rectified this on the later 512s by fitting dry sump lubrication, which sort of eradicated that problem, but it made the car heavier. The extra oil capacity, the extra infrastructure. And the funny thing is, you can actually tell when you start at one of these from cold, whether it's a 365 or a 512, because on the 365, the oil pump, you can hear it cavitating behind your ears in the engine compartment, the wet sump oil pump. On the 512s, it's much quieter. unlike the plane that happens to be taking off alongside the building. The joys of being on an airfield. Yeah, quite a lot of stuff there. I'll delve more into the technical side of things as we go. Yeah, a very lengthy overview of the Ferrari 512 BB, and it isn't finished yet. Well, this is the business end of the BB, the Berlinetta Boxer. So essentially you have the inlet tracks at the top here. I was mentioning there's plenty of room here. This is the fuel injected version, so it's the last, the Mark III, if you will. And it's the most tame of the three of them. The first one, the 365, was very leery. It developed power curve right up to 7,700 RPM on carburetors, so it was always a little bit coffee and spluttery, as carburetors are, in comparison to fuel injection. And it comes through the inlets here, and then it goes down through the inlet ports into the inlet valves on the top camshaft, and then vertically below that is the exhaust cam, and the gases come out of that and then underneath through the manifolds to the system at the back of the car. These are very tricky to set up, these fuel injected cars, a bit like Countach's, but more so with Ferraris, because this Bosch Cagetronic system is a beautifully simple but effective system. But here you've got two banks of six, two almost independent fuel injection systems, except they're not independent. You've got a balance pipe between the two of them, and then the warm-up regulator, as it's called, which is buried under here, actually controls both banks. And this engine, this car's had a lot of work done on it while it's been here, of various sorts. And getting the fuel injection set up on these engines is very tricky, actually, to get it perfect. You can get 99% of the time, you can get it 99%. That final 1% is quite elusive, but I reckon I'm on the way. I reckon I've cracked this. They are tricky to set up because of the interplay between the two banks, but this particular version, they introduced the injection because it's more accurate fueling wise than carburetors for emissions reasons. So this burns more cleanly than the carburetor engines, basically, which is where it was all at in the late 70s and early 80s for Ferrari as well as any other manufacturer. And they had to detune their engines so that the smog coming out the back of them, the carbon monoxide, the hydrocarbons, etc., were kept to a minimum. And that meant the engine had to burn more cleanly, which meant it had to be detuned, essentially. So that's why these only rev to 6,500 RPM. Bigger capacity engine, more torque, but less top-end power and less revs at the top end. This happened to everybody. All manufacturers went through this. I'm going to finish setting this up now, and then we can take it for a drive on the road and hopefully see how it is, see how it performs. This is a little trick. This is the mixture adjustment screw here, and if you put your finger on it and the revs rise slightly, the mixture is right. This is too lean at the moment because the engine's hunting, it's not happy. I've set that one up. There, the revs have just increased by 25, 30 RPM. Same again, rough. Yeah, that's great. You can hear the difference. All I've done is turn the mixture, but I know that that is now right. The engine smooths out as soon as I cover the adjustment hole over. Very good. So I can put the screw back in that now. And that's a job well done. And hopefully with some rather lovely throttle response. That'll do nicely. as I alluded to earlier, they're very different, each of these Ferrari Boxers. The 365 is the most leery, it's the most highly tuned engine, and it's the fastest. And Ferrari quoted some pretty crazy numbers when it was new. I think slightly ambitious. 380 brake horsepower and 188 miles an hour, if you please, which is Porsche weren't even in the running, but not with road cars anyway. And the Lamborghini Countach wouldn't reach 188 miles an hour, but I don't think a Ferrari 365 Boxer would either. Nevertheless, it was one of the fastest supercars of its era, if not the fastest, the Ferrari Boxer. So we are sampling a 1980s icon here. I'm just warming it up slowly. The gearbox is beginning to come to life. You've got to be so careful with these Ferrari gearboxes, particularly with second gear. I may just have to richen it up a wee bit because I'm not very happy with the low speed running, but that's okay. We will put a CO meter on it to double check and verify, but it's still fine. Yeah, behind you here on the 365 there's like a whirring, cavitating noise, and that's the wet sump system. So if somebody blindfolded me, I could actually tell which generation of Boxer I was driving. But I think these are a criminally underrated and undervalued car, actually. I really do. Criminally. When you consider, I mean, a Dino is worth twice what one of these is. Okay, the Dino is very pretty, but this styling, based on the Pininfarina Modulo styling and the couple of other stunning Pininfarina design exercises that were around at the time, Leonardo Fioravanti, one of their top designers, styled the Daytona, and this, I think this car has matured amazingly well. I really am very impressed with the styling of this car. I think it looks absolutely right. Those lovely, the complete opposite of the Porsche 944, for example, or BMW M3 wheel arches. These are sort of straight out and curved, whereas the Porsche 944, the later 80s styling was very much for the sort of coffin-sided wheel arches, exemplified by the Porsche 944 or the E30 BMW M3. Very completely different wheel arch design, but these are just so, the whole car is just right styling wise now, and I didn't like them as a kid when they first came out. I couldn't take to them at all, but that quite often happens. I find Pininfarina designs mature. They do mature and grow on me. I didn't like the 550 Maranello when that first came out, but actually I do like it now. Very colour sensitive car, I think. I'm sporting the Renaults today, just because I can. I'm fantasising that I'm on Pacific Coast Highway 1. It's a glorious summer day here, or spring day. The car's it is just a touch weak. It's hunting at low revs, but that's easily sorted. We've done such a lot of work to the injection system on this car. They normally need 2 or 3 bites of the cherry. And it's funny, it sounds different as well. I mean, that flat 12 noise is so different from the Testarossa, which is the sort of the son of Boxer, really. It's even the noise has got different from generation to generation. There isn't the induction roar with the fuel injection system, because you've got those great big aluminium plenum chambers and pipes, trunks, inlet tracts, whereas the carburetors open out to air filter housing. So a very different setup, not as much roar. Yeah, we're getting to the stage now where we can see what this car has, and it's redlined at 6,500 RPM, which is very much lower than the 365. Dare I say, not just because of what I was talking about earlier, about the fact that the oil splashes about in a wet sump engine where all the oil is directly underneath it, but I think the 512 engines probably last longer than the 365 engines, but they're not. The 365 is such great fun. We'll just finish our warm-up cycle and then we'll be on our way. Okay, we may run out of road, but let's try it. Yes. It's supposedly about 340 brake horsepower, this. Maybe 360 depending on which bit of printed matter you read from the time, but wow. This feels every inch the 1980s supercar. The brakes are barely up to the job by modern car standards. Still a joy. And this car, I know it's a cliche, but this car really does shrink around you. It's not the roomiest cabin in the world, but you can point this car very nicely. And that engine, as one would expect, is so eager. Yes, lovely, lovely, lovely. This car was in a bit of a sorry state when it came in. It's all just about present and correct now. Just a few ironing out bits. I'm going to richen that mixture up to get rid of that low speed hunting. But here we are again. Beautiful. What a feast for the senses this is. And of course this has got no ABS on it. It's pre that. So it's very much down to the driver to regulate the controls. There's no power assisted clutch. It's a manual gearbox. That it's like putting a knife through butter. The change on it now that it's hot. Just beautiful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, this is hunting quite badly at low revs, very badly, so I'm going to just readjust the mixture now. This quite often happens. They need a retune. It's a process of elimination. It's funny, engines have memory effects. When they've been running rich or running lean, when the fuel mixture's been different, it can take a while for them to settle down after you've adjusted them and maybe readjust them again. That's just the way it is. So that's exactly what we're going to do and take the car out for a run again. Well, this is going to be version 2, so I'm just going to check this again and we'll see what we have. Yeah, that's weak. Still weak. It's amazing how much these things change. There we go. The world of difference. That could make all the difference in the world. It's the tiny adjustments. Very happy with that. That's better. I'm going to just tweak this one up a wee bit more. You can still hear the engine note change slightly. Okay, we'll put the plugs back in and give that a try. Well, here we are on road test version 2, and it's incredibly difficult to keep this car under control because the throttle linkage on a right-hand drive car especially goes right the way round and up to the engine and operates, just in this case, 2 butterflies, but it's it's a bit like an on-off switch, the accelerator pedal. You push and nothing happens, then you push and something happens, then you push a wee bit more and it all happens. Yeah, it's very difficult to moderate. As I've said before, this is what I would call a linear throttle response. So you push the pedal a quarter of the way down and the throttle's open a quarter of the way, which gives you sudden throttle response. as opposed to a nice graduated logarithmic style thing. But immediately the hunting has gone at low revs. The kangaroo petrol, as customers used to call it, has gone, and the car has smoothed out. I suspect I'll probably have to have a third bite of the cherry, but it's absolutely smooth as silk now compared to what it was before. Just that tiniest adjustment makes all the difference. That's what it's all about. As I say, they are surprisingly tricky to get dead right, these cars. If you overcook it and they're too rich, they start hunting at low revs. So let's just see what we have now, shall we? Probably more instant throttle response. Not much wrong with that, thank you. Even more shove in the back there because the engine's fueling just properly. Yeah, and I'm just literally, I'm touching the throttle there, and it's because it's a bit stiff, and they all are. I remember we had this problem with Harry's Countach because they suffer with the same thing, particularly the right-hand drive ones. We absolutely lashed the throttle cable with oil. Yeah, it did it. It sorted it out. It was better, but yeah, this is getting towards being right now. I'm very happy with this. It's tuned in beautifully. We'll turn round and I'll do a little bit of mischievous engine response testing. Well, this is the sign or the litmus test for a well-tuned Ferrari. I'm in 4th gear and I'm doing just over 20 miles an hour. I'm going to floor the throttle, which is just over idle speed, 1,000 revs, and let's see how the engine picks up. That's foot on the floor. A little bit juddery. But it's okay. I'm going to do one more retune on the engine. It's just a case of having the patience and gradually bringing these things to life. But we've done a lot of recommissioning work on this car. But yeah, it's on the way. I mean, 1,000 for a flat 12 high-performance 1980s engine to pull from 1,000 RPM at full throttle in high gear is asking quite a lot. But this is sensational. To be in a 1980s supercar, a taste of what things Ferrari's best at the time. So I'm going to ask you please to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and if you enjoy the content. It does make a difference to the algorithms. It helps us with these videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with something else very soon.